Kkakdugi is kimchi's lesser known cousin, but I like to argue that it is the far superior version of kimchi. While it is pretty similar to kimchi in that it's another fermented dish with similar ingredients, I believe the radish used in Kkakdugi is what makes it better than kimchi. The radish brings a crispness, a more robust texture, and more uniformity to each bite when compared to the cabbage used in kimchi. So let's make the far superior fermented Korean dish, the Kkakdugi. The first step is to get some nice radishes. We want to peel the outer skin of the radish using a speed peeler. If you haven't done any forearm exercises, then you'll be in for a treat. Holding this radish for the entirety of the peeling process made them extra sore. Anyways, the point of the peeling process is to not only get the outer layer off, but to also get rid of the extra roots or blemishes that are still on the radish. Once peeled, give the radish a good rinse. Technically, I don't think you need to rinse it since I did just take off the outer layer, but might as well since I peeled it over a sink. In terms of portion sizes, I peeled and washed 2 radishes because I go through a lot of Kkakdugi. I think I have Kkakdugi with every single rice dish because, I'm Korean. However, 1 radish should be enough for most people and should last around 1 to 2 months. Once the radishes are peeled and washed, cut them into inch-thick discs. This is the first step of getting the radishes to bite-sized cubes. I'm sure there is a mathematical way of getting this huge radish into bite-sized chunks in the least amount of knife strokes, but for now, this is the best I got. Once the radish discs are prepped, get a decently sized bowl. In that decently sized bowl, add a protein powder scoop of salt. This one was 25 cc's, which is a little over 1.5 tablespoons. After you added the salt, make sure you spread the salt evenly at the bottom. Now that you got your bowl prepped, we can start cutting the radish discs into bite-sized cubes. I found that the easiest way of doing this is to cut the disc into an inch-thick rectangle and then rotating it and repeating the same step again. This gets you decently even chunks. If you do see some outer layer still left on, any blemishes or roots still left over, you can just slice it right off. Anyways, this takes a decent amount of time, especially if you're cutting more than 1 radish, so just be careful. The radish discs are a bit slippery, so make sure you don't lose focus while doing this mind-numbing task. Although I did try out how many radishes I can cut at once, I found that trying to cut 4 radishes stacked on top of each other is definitely not the way to go. I think the sweet spot is 2 since you're not losing as much speed due to the slightly increased thickness of 2 radishes on top of each other. Once all your radishes are in your metal container, add 1 scoop of salt. Once again, this is the same protein powder scoop which says 25 cc's, and to be a little more exact than 1.5 tablespoon, I found out is 1.69 tablespoons. With that, we can start mixing the radishes so that everything's coated evenly with salt. Once mixed, cut your radishes and put them aside for now. I'm going to use the same cutting board I used to cut the radishes, but you can cover it with almost anything. The point of this is to just prevent any dust or particles falling into it while we're waiting for the water to leach out. I would say that around 2 hours is the minimum amount of time you have to wait for the salt to have the water leach out from the radishes. Now we're going to make the sweet rice powder mixture. Get a pot and pour 1 cup of fish anchovy stock. You can use water instead if you don't have any stock lying around. Next, add 25 cc's of the sweet rice powder to the pot. The sweet rice powder goop that we're trying to make is going to act like the glue that sticks all the seasonings to the radishes. It can also serve as a food source for the bacteria during the fermentation process. And with that, all we have to do now is whisk the powder in. Once you have dissolved the sweet rice powder, put the pot over the stove on medium heat. We are now going to whisk it again so that the powder turns into a glob. Make sure you're constantly whisking it so that the sweet rice powder does not burn. Burnt sweet rice powder will literally ruin your entire Kkakdugi batch. Anyways, the transformation from liquid to a glob happens almost instantly, so keep an eye on it. You want to stop when it looks like this. Speaking of which, doesn't this look kind of familiar? Anyways, just leave the sweet rice glob aside and let it cool. Now we're gonna wash our green onions and chives. In terms of the amount, I believe there's one bunch of green onions in this mixture and one decently huge handful of Chinese chives. I'm adding more than a normal person would because I like green onions and chives, so the amount is really up to you. And with that, wash your green onions and chives. Peel off any sad looking parts and make sure there's no dirt in the inner portions of the chives. Once washed, place the chives and green onions onto a drying rack. You want them to be very close to being completely dried so that the water does not dilute the Kkakdugi seasoning we're going to add later. Depending on how big your bowl with radishes is, the step can be either easy or hard. The goal here is to drain the water out of the bowl. I covered my bowl with the cutting board and left a really small slit at the bottom to drain the water. Do this step slowly and hold the cutting board tight so that any radishes don't start flying out. And with that, now it's time to cut the green onions. I start off with the green onions and chop them into bite-sized chunks. In terms of the white part of the green onion, we want to slice it into half and into half again, so basically into quarters. This will make it more pleasant to eat and not so oniony. If you missed any wilted parts, you can cut those off and throw it away. No one wants slimy green onions in their Kkakdugi. Now, cut the chives. The Chinese chives can be cut all at once. Bunch them up like this and give them a nice chop. Once again, they should be bite-sized, so chop away. Once that is all done, put the bowl aside and bring out the food processor. We're going to use the food processor to make some paste. First, chop up some onions into smaller chunks so that it can fit inside the food processor. Next, add a little less than a cup of garlic into the food processor. Then add a knob of ginger, 50 cc's or around 3 tablespoons of this salt shrimp paste. I'm pretty sure most people add way more, probably even double the amount I'm using, but I keep it at the very bare minimum because I don't really like seeing shrimp eyeballs in my Kkadugi. Once that is all done, give it a good mix. Make sure all the ginger and garlic is completely broken down, or else someone will legit eat a whole ginger or garlic thinking it was a radish. Now, we finally have all the ingredients ready to go. So to your bowl, add your suspicious looking white goop. Add 1 tablespoon of sugar. Next, add your minced ingredients. Make sure you also scrape the stuff off the lid. A decent amount of stuff gets stuck there. Add 1 cup of red pepper flakes. 25 cc's of fish sauce. Don't get this on your hand cause it legit stinks. Then mix. This mixing stage is the most important part. We want all the ingredients to be incorporated into every piece of this radish. The more you mix, the redder the Kkadugi gets. So mix until it's really red, and I think for this batch I mixed for a good 5 minutes. With that, you are done. Move the radishes into a container so we can ferment it. I've seen some people who eat this unripened Kkadugi right away, but unless you like raw radishes, I would suggest you wait until it ferments. In terms of how long it takes around 2 days if left outside at room temperature. If it's the summer, it may ripen faster. Likewise, if it's winter, it may need some more time. Anyways, remember to pack your Kkadugi nice and tight so there are no huge air gaps in between them. Once that is done, add your plastic wrap and leave it out on your counter for 2 days. Once those 2 days are up, move it to your fridge. And that's it. This superior kimchi can be made pretty easily and is much cheaper and probably more delicious than buying it already made at a store. Low-key, those stores are ripping you off, so go ahead, try making your own Kkadugi. Enjoy!